Hello and welcome, and thanks for tuning in. You're watching Gravitas. My name is Priyanka Sharma. Here's our show for tonight. The Israel-Hamas war has been raging for 2 weeks now. We've been asking what happens if the war spills over into a wider regional conflict. Tonight we have a different question. Is the Palestinian cause uniting the Muslim world? Just see what's happening in the Middle East. Calls for a humanitarian corridor are growing, an escape route for Palestinians from Gaza. It was only last week that Iran called on Islamic and Arab countries to form a united front against Israel. If the Muslim world does come together to support the Palestinian cause, what will happen to Israel? And of course, its foremost champion, the United States of America. That's the question we ask tonight. Stay with me on Gravitas. So we begin tonight with some questions. Is the Muslim world finally coming together? Has the Palestinian cause united Islamic nations? Are they looking to join hands against Israel and its backer, the United States? Well, officially, most Islamic countries have refused to get drawn in the war. But the developments on ground in some Islamic nations tell a different story. We'll start with Egypt. Earlier today, there were anti-Israel protests in Egypt. They took place in the country's 9 governorates, as well as in several locations in its capital, Cairo. The demonstrators chanted pro-Palestine slogans and urged their government to take action against Israel. The timing of the protests is striking. They come right after a statement from Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. He recently blamed Israel for the Gaza hospital blast. Observers say the stance is somewhat uncharacteristic for Sisi, given how he's aligned himself with Israel in recent years. Well, that stance seems to be changing now. But the question is, why? Is it because of pro-Palestine sentiments in Egypt? Yes, says Sisi's critics. They're pointing at the upcoming presidential election in Egypt, an election in which a pro-Palestine stance could help the country's president in winning. And next up, we have the UAE. It's not witnessing any protests, but just 2 days back, it was among the first states to blame Israel for the bombing of a Gaza hospital. It has even requested an emergency UN Security Council meeting over Israel's alleged actions. This is highly unusual for the Sheikhdom, given how it has normalized ties with Israel in 2020. Next, we have Jordan. 2 days back, it cancelled a summit between US President Joe Biden, Egyptian government officials, and Palestinian leaders. The reason was the same: the alleged Israeli airstrike. Jordan's foreign minister, Eman Safadi, called it a massacre and accused Israel of pushing the region to the brink of the abyss. Next, we have Bahrain, another country which normalized ties with Israel after the 2020 Abraham Accords. It has also issued a statement against Israel expressing its condemnation and denunciation of what it called a quote-unquote Israeli bombing. What's worse are reports like these. An Indian origin doctor getting fired from a hospital in Bahrain. Why? Because he posted anti-Palestine tweets. The doctor in question was an internal medicine specialist at the Bahrain Royal Hospital. It has sacked the doctor from his post for posting content that was considered offensive to Bahrain society. Now let's talk about Saudi Arabia. Last week, it reportedly put plans of normalization of ties with Israel on the back burner. It also apparently initiated a rapid rethinking of its foreign policy amid the war. What's even more striking is how Saudi engagements with Iran have amplified. Reports say the hotline between Tehran and Riyadh is still active. Next up, we have Syria. On October 18th, a US Army base came under attack in Syria. Reports say 2 drones were shot down, while a third reached its target. a U.S. military base in eastern Syria's Tanf region. Listen to this statement now by the Pentagon's press secretary.
Early yesterday morning, Syria time, October 18th, the Tanf garrison in Syria was targeted by 2 drones. U.S. and coalition forces engaged one drone, destroying it, while the other drone impacted the base, resulting in minor injuries to coalition forces.
The same day when a U.S. base in Syria was attacked, there was another attack in Iraq. Reports say drones and rockets struck at least 2 military bases housing American troops. Multiple blasts were also reported at other U.S. Army bases in the country. There's more. Look at these visuals now. They're from Baghdad. They show hundreds of supporters of Iranian-backed paramilitary groups. They were seen leaving for Iraq's main border crossing with Jordan. What for? To show their solidarity with Gaza and to call for an end to the blockade imposed by Israel. Listen in.
We are going today to claim victory for our people in Palestine and the house of God, Jerusalem, and to answer the calls of the Shia leadership body, the people and Arabs. We call all the people and Arabs to unite to lift the blockade on the Mujahideen. We condemn the brutal Zionists, the Jews, and the biggest devil, America, as they target children, destroy homes, and displace families.
There are protests in Pakistan too. On Thursday, hundreds of people marched through Pakistan's capital, Islamabad. Some of them even draped American and Israeli flags on the road and trampled over them. Interestingly, a video from Pakistan is now going viral. It shows Pakistani citizens spilling Coca-Cola on the streets. Why? Because they thought that Coca-Cola was an Israeli brand. Then in the United Kingdom, pro-Palestinian activists are apparently plotting attacks on defense manufacturers. A Times UK report states that these activists are seeking ways to target a defense electronics firm called Elbit Systems. The firm is a subsidiary of an Israeli company. How will these activists target this firm? By smashing its offices with sledgehammers, they say. And lastly, as I speak, a summit is underway in Saudi Arabia, a summit of the Gulf Cooperation Council Association of Southeast Asian nations. It's being held in Riyadh. Speaking at the summit, a number of Gulf leaders called for a ceasefire in the ongoing war. They also stressed on the need for the entry of humanitarian aid to Gaza.
The only way to end a cycle of violence is through a lasting resolution to the conflict. And I think we in the GCC are very satisfied that our brothers in ASEAN have adopted a position that is very, very important and positive.
So from Saudi Arabia to the UAE, from Jordan to Syria, from Egypt to Pakistan, almost every Islamic country is condemning Israel's actions. As the citizens of these countries stage widespread protests, the question is, what will the next move be? What kind of steps, if any, are these countries thinking about? Only time will tell. For now, our list of questions continues. Here are some more. Is the war in Israel becoming an American war? I ask this question because 24 hours back, the US Navy did something unusual. It intercepted missiles heading towards Israel. This happened in the Red Sea, an inlet in the Indian Ocean lying between Asia and Africa. On Thursday, the USS Carney, a US Navy destroyer, intercepted 3 missiles here. The name of the warship is USS Carney, a guided missile destroyer. And the missiles in question had apparently been fired by the Houthi rebels. For the unversed, the Houthis are Iran-backed rebels in Yemen. They too oppose the Israeli state. In fact, their slogan includes the phrase, "Death to Israel." So the fact that the Houthis fired a missile at Israel is hardly surprising. But what is surprising is the involvement of the American Navy. Speaking about the incident, a Pentagon spokesperson said that it had no certainty of the target of the missiles, but they were potentially bound for Israel. Potentially. Listen to this.
To that end, the crew of the guided missile destroyer USS Carney, operating in the northern Red Sea earlier today, shot down 3 land attack cruise missiles and several drones that were launched by Houthi forces in Yemen. Information about these engagements is still being processed. We cannot say for certain what these missiles and drones were targeting, but they were launched from Yemen, heading north along the Red Sea, potentially towards targets in Israel.
You heard that. We cannot say for certain what these missiles were targeting. What do we make of this statement? Did America act on insight or perception? No one knows. Whatever be the case, the incident has led to speculation and more questions. Speculation on whether the US is becoming involved in West Asia once again, and questions on how far is it willing to go for Israel. Will it restrict itself to providing defense aid, or will it involve itself militarily in this war? Again, if we go by developments, it seems like the United States is looking for a greater role. Look at this Axios report. It says the Pentagon is planning to give Israel tens of thousands of artillery shells. The report states that this deal was struck after Israeli defense officials told their counterparts that they urgently need artillery shells for the ground invasion of Gaza. America seems to have complied to the request. It apparently plans to divert shells from Ukraine to Israel. That's not all. In Washington, the US president has appealed to Congress to pass a massive defense spending package which would include billions of dollars in additional weapons for Israel. Listen in.
The security package I'm sending to Congress and asking Congress to do is an unprecedented commitment to Israel's security that will sharpen Israel's qualitative military edge, which we've committed to, the qualitative military edge. We're going to make sure Iron Dome continues to guard the skies over Israel. We're going to make sure other hostile actors in the region know that Israel is stronger than ever and prevent this conflict from spreading.
So two things are amply clear. One, America is sending arms to Israel. Two, it will not hesitate to help Israel militarily if the need rises. Back in the US, America's involvement is not being received well, even within government circles. Look at this report now. A veteran US State Department official has resigned over America's decision to send arms to Israel. He's called the move short-sighted, destructive, and unjust. The US government does not agree. So this begs a very significant question. If America does increase its involvement in Israel, what could it lead to? Will it open new fronts in this war? Will we see more countries joining the war? This question may seem far-fetched, but there are already murmurs about it. And to discuss this and more, joining me now for more analysis is Ehtesham Shahid. He is an editor at the Emirates Policy Center. Ehtesham, thanks for joining me on Gravitas at this hour.
Thank you.
How do you view this recent development? It seems to be the first US military action taken to defend Israel in this war. A US missile destroyer intercepting Houthi missiles. It begs the question, is this now becoming an American war?
Not on the face of it. I mean, it's easy to arrive at those conclusions, but you look at the larger picture and it doesn't seem to be moving in that direction, at least for now. As far as the Arab countries are concerned, they understand that there is bipartisan support for Israel in the United States. So it's a given that nobody even questions that. What they expect is the least semblance balance between the two sides, especially when on issues such as humanitarian corridors and things like that. It's an unequal war anyways. The conflict has been going on for so many decades. So it's understood that it's not a black and white phenomenon. You have to look at arguments from both sides, and sometimes you tilt towards one or the other. But then the way things started unfolding from October 7 and the response and the equilibrium of the response, if I may call it that, was in question. And then the hospital bombing happened. Now you hear that a church has been bombed. So it's been so many mixed signals coming in, and all that was happening at a time when there was I called it a season of rapprochement in this part of the world. The Iranians and the Saudis were talking, and that was likely to have a cascading impact on countries such as Yemen and Lebanon and Syria and all that.
If I may interject there, you're talking about the season of rapprochement. Do we also see the Muslim world uniting for the Palestinian cause? And what happens then to Israel and the United States?
The Muslim world has been united on the Palestinian cause for a long time now. I mean, if you go out of this region, countries such as Indonesia and Malaysia, they've always been calling for a. It's probably unfair to label it that way, because the entire world has been united on a two-state solution. And there are United Nations resolutions. Almost every party outside of the conflicting parties maintain that there should be a two-state solution. But there has been no movement on that front. And then once something like this happens, the least the Arabs expect is an equal and opposite, measured response from both sides. But when you see the Americans strongly being on the side of the Israelis, and not even willing to condemn the attacks on civilians in Gaza, then it reaches a level of desperation that we've witnessed on the streets of the Middle East and Europe, and a large intelligentsia also coming out.
Talking about the US's strategy here, what you just mentioned now, President Biden is pledging to provide Israel billions of dollars in additional aid. In fact, reports are also saying that a veteran US State Department official has resigned, and he has called this move short-sighted and destructive. What's your assessment of that?
Well, there are no surprises. And as far as the Arab world is concerned, it's not a surprise that they're willing to back Israel to the extent that they are. But then that you will have to look at the cause and effect here. Because now the Arab world is also getting together. Now there was a GCC ASEAN summit that you mentioned. There's going to be a Cairo summit tomorrow, which is being for which a lot of European leaders are coming in. South Africa's president is going to be there. So they are also gravitating towards probably trying to, I don't know if it is a positive out in these very gloomy times, but this could be a sign of trying to revive a Middle East peace process once and for all. Again, this is going beyond the narrative for now, but you never know with a conflict of this kind what turn it takes. So if there is very consolidated support for Israel from the American side, then that might also lead to a counter-polarization on the other side, and that will have its impact on a lot of geostrategic and economic corridors and things like that. The I2, U2, all that will come into question if it becomes more polarized than it is at the moment.
Right now, Ehtisham, and some analysts are also saying that the United States is close to being pulled into a Middle East war. We're also asking the same question. What's your assessment?
I don't think that stage has come yet. I don't think Middle East will jump into, especially with an election around the corner. I don't think they'll jump into a conflict of this kind. But yes, as far as steadfast support for Israel is concerned, that will continue, not just from the US, but countries like the UK and others. And that will also have an impact on the Arab countries, which have been trying to navigate between competing powers. There is also a China factor here, because China was very actively trying to resolve the Middle East, the Israel-Palestinian issue. And after the Iran-Saudi rapprochement happened, there were reports that the next could be Israel-Palestine. Now, that is a very, very big issue, because if China had managed to resolve this issue, that would have brought its hegemony in this part of the world, given a complete stamp, which didn't happen. So you never know. You connect the dots sometimes and say, oh, is this because China was taking too much of an advantage as far as the Middle East was concerned? So now it's all gone back to square one, and then a fresh start has to be made somewhere.
Just a final question. Let's talk about the hostage crisis. This is a hostage crisis like no other. Who will help get the hostages home? Will Qatar's diplomacy work in this case?
No, Egypt has always been a major player. They can come in. Jordanians have been trying to mediate between the Palestinians and Israelis. So there are enough players in the region who can bring about a resolution. UAE has always been very active on this front. So if they get together, if they make up their mind, if they think that the best way to resolve is to get a ceasefire, get the humanitarian corridors open, get the hostage situation resolved, that works for both the parties. But it will only happen if the Israelis are at least willing to give that kind of diplomacy a chance. If they continue to bombard people, it's not going to help, because the summit in Jordan had to be cancelled. If another summit is cancelled, then there are no corridors, but there are no windows for negotiations.
Right. Ehtisham, thank you so much for all your analyses, and thanks for joining us on Gravitas.
Thank you.
Next question. Is Israel combat ready? Here's what the Israeli defense minister has to say.
Anyone who now sees Gaza from a distance will see it from the inside. I promise you.
This was Gallant's promise to the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, that they will see Gaza from inside. In other words, a ground operation is happening.
There is no forgiveness for this thing. Only total annihilation of Hamas organization, terror infrastructures. It will take a week, it will take a month, it will take 2 months until we eliminate them.
This is not the first time Israeli officials are vowing to annihilate the Hamas. The entire Gaza Strip is under siege, the enclave is being bombarded, and it looks like the IDF is on its last leg of preparation for a ground offensive. Tanks have been amassed, so have troops. More than 300,000 reservists have been called in. There are more than 150,000 active forces. But questions remain. 1. While Israel's air prowess is unquestionable, its ground troops are mostly made up of conscripts. And now you have reservists. Analysts cite that this is a disadvantage. The IDF will be up against Hamas operatives who are training regularly, also possibly highly trained Hezbollah fighters. Here's something else analysts claim. Israel's force spends more time policing territories than rehearsing combined arms operations. Another question, how well do IDF ground troops know Gaza's urban terrain? Because let's face it, a ground operation is likely to be messy. The IDF needs to be prepared for a whole range of tactics that Hamas is likely to use. 1. Positioning snipers in the windows of apartment blocks. 2. Using tripwires to set off IEDs. 3. Hamas is also likely to attack Israeli armored vehicles with grenades. 4. The IDF needs to be prepared for Hamas disguising fighters as ordinary civilians. So what's the guarantee that Hamas has already not moved fighters to the south of Gaza? 5. The IDF's biggest challenge will be the Gaza metro. In other words, Hamas's tunnel network. Chances are that's where Hamas operatives would have set up their base. We told you this at length yesterday. This tunnel network reportedly runs over 450 kilometers. It's in the depth of around 230 feet. Hamas uses this network of tunnels to move around its operatives and arms. The challenge before the IDF would be to locate its points of entry. Is Israel ready for this? Here's what the IDF has to say.
The army continues to prepare for the next stage of the war, the maneuver. The forces are in the field, training, organizing, studying, researching, studying everything that has happened in the fighting so far and the lessons they must learn.
Now, to understand Israel's strategy in this war, I earlier spoke to Chaim Mailspin, a sergeant major in the IDF. I spoke to him at length about Israel's possible ground offensive. I also asked him how Israel plans to save the hostages. Listen in to this exclusive. Joining me today on Gravitas is Chaim Mailspin. He's a sergeant major at the Israel Defense Forces. Thanks for joining us. Now, my first question for you, when do you believe a ground offensive would happen? What's the purpose behind this ground offensive, really?
I cannot say anything about when, but I do know that our job is to rescue hostages. We need to be able to rescue hostages and bring them in, and also to dismantle the Hamas terrorist organization and remove the threat, restore security to our borders. And that is what we're going to do.
Do you expect hostages to be held in the tunnels as well?
Absolutely. Hostages are held in lots of places. For sure, it's believed that in the tunnels would be one of the main places. This is a very hard to do mission. It's very convoluted, complicated, and it's going to take a lot of strategy and a lot of This mission is, of course, very, very complicated, convoluted. It's going to take precision and it's going to take professional skill, and it's going to take some time. But yes, we will achieve the objective, which is rescuing hostages and dismantling this terror group, this threat to the security of the region and our borders.
A big concern for the world. Do you expect Hezbollah to join this war from Lebanon?
We are prepared for all circumstances. We believe that they got the message loud and clear that it's very unwise to do so. We hope that they will listen and not make this a multi-front war. And that's what I can say about that.
Thank you, Major, for speaking to us on Gravitas. Next question. Could Hezbollah tilt the scales against Israel? Here's the thing. For now, Lebanon's Hezbollah may be content with distracting the IDF as it launches airstrikes on Gaza. But if or when the IDF decides to go into Gaza, indicators are Hezbollah may declare a full-fledged war against Israel. These are battled, hardened fighters, well-trained fighters. They have fought Israel before, and they can tilt the scales against Israel. Reports say Hezbollah has 100,000 fighters. It's hard to verify that number. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Hezbollah is the world's most heavily armed non-state actor. It is believed to have 130,000 missiles. It also has anti-aircraft and anti-ship missiles. These are also anti-tank missiles. In 2006, Hezbollah's stockpile was estimated to be 14,000. Experts believe this number has now gone up to 150,000. Let me repeat that. 150,000. Most of these missiles are short range. Experts claim that Hezbollah also has a special forces unit. This unit has been trained to infiltrate Israel in the event of a war. The United States estimates that as of 2018, Hezbollah's military budget is $700 million. Most, if not all of this money comes from Iran. 2006 was the last time Israel and Hezbollah came face to face. The war lasted 34 days. Many Hezbollah fighters died. More than 1,000 Lebanese citizens died. Several Israeli soldiers died too. Parts of Beirut were leveled by Israeli strikes. Cut to present. And the increasing chances of Hezbollah joining the war. Israel is already preparing for the worst. In others, for a war with Hezbollah. This is the Israeli town of Kiryat Shimona. Some 20,000 people live here. The town is just a few kilometers from the Lebanese border. Israeli officials have asked all residents to evacuate.
Safe. My father is live here in Kiryat Shimona. We take her to my home and try to survive.
We are born here. We went through 2 or 3 wars in the north. We hope there will be an end to it.
Israel's principal backer, the United States, also understands the challenge that Hezbollah is bringing. How else do you explain this?
Iron Dome interceptors from stocks that the United States has in country have been quickly provided to Israel. And in the days ahead, we'll be flowing additional Iron Dome interceptors so that Israel has the capabilities they need to sustain their Iron Dome defense systems and protect their citizens and cities from rocket attacks.
Washington had previously purchased these batteries from Israel as the IDF prepares for the possibility of a fresh barrage of rockets and missiles from Hezbollah. The U.S. is doing its bit to ensure that the Iron Dome is not stretched to its limits and is successful in intercepting incoming threats. On ground too, Israel appears to be prepared for a war with Hezbollah. These are visuals from Israel's border with Lebanon. You can see Israeli troops and tanks stationed here. So, how is Hezbollah versus Israel likely to play out? Here's what analysts say. Hezbollah will target Israel's critical infrastructure. This includes Israel's airport. Hezbollah is also likely to hit major electricity grids in Israel. The Israeli offensive, experts believe, will be led by its air force. How will this story end? It is not something for us to second guess. Here's what Israel's defense minister has to say.
If Hezbollah wants to start a campaign, it should first take photos of Gaza City.
As the fighting rages on, what is the human cost of the Israel-Hamas war? If so many lives devastated on both sides of the Gaza border, in the Gaza Strip, about 2 million people displaced await critical supplies of food, water and medicines. They are searching for their loved ones amid the non-stop airstrikes. On the other side, there is a desperate wait for those taken hostage by Hamas. An eerie silence prevails in the town of Kibbutz in Israel, paralyzed by the terror unleashed by Hamas. As the war continues, Gaza is on the brink of critical essentials running out. This is a place where suffering and despair have reached unimaginable levels.
We don't need help and bring something, food to Gaza. It doesn't help. People dying. Stop bombing. Stop Israel's aggression for Gaza Strip.
Aid has still not reached Gaza. Deprivation, destruction and displacement define life in Gaza as of now. Trucks loaded with aid are stranded at the Rafah crossing near Egypt. Despite getting a green light from Israel, it still remains unclear when the delivery of the relief material will start. Washington says the details are still being hammered out. The UN chief visited the Rafah border on the Egyptian side, underlining the urgency.
Behind these walls, we have 2 million people that is suffering enormously, that has no water, no food, no medicine, no fuel, that is under fire, that needs everything to survive.
Israel's relentless strikes have killed more than 4,100 people. Israel says that it has hit over 100 operational targets of the militant organization in the Gaza Strip. The bombs keep raining from the skies. Much of Gaza has now been reduced to dust and rubble.
The people came from Gaza to play. Children playing, looking for a safe place. There is no safe place. None. In the name of God, there is no safe place. No safe place, man. They're dropping bombs on children's heads.
But things could get worse. There is a looming threat of invasion. Israeli tanks are standing ready on the border between Israel and Gaza as Israel appeared to be getting closer to a full-scale invasion of the enclave ruled by Hamas. This is the Israeli defense minister saying the invasion will happen soon.
Get organized. Be ready. The order will come. Thank you so much, guys. We trust you. Good luck, and we'll meet again. Whoever sees Gaza from afar now will see it from the inside. I promise you. That's a promise.
And then there is Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is pledging to emerge victorious after the war.
We are going to win with all our might. Are you ready? The entire state of Israel stands behind you, and we will give the hard blow to our enemies so that we achieve victory. For victory, are you ready? Yes, until victory.
To escape the Israeli bombings, people are taking refuge inside mosques, churches and hospitals. But Israel says that Hamas is using them to launch rocket attacks. Today, a Greek Orthodox church sheltering hundreds was hit by Israeli strikes. All that is left is piles of debris and rubble. Israel says the church was damaged in a strike on a militant command center.
They came here to escape the airstrikes and the destruction. They thought they were safe here. The destruction followed them.
There's no denying it, the situation is critical, with Palestinians rescuing their children trapped beneath the rubble. This is after an Israeli strike hit a house in Jabalia refugee camp. There's commotion and chaos. Some children patiently wait while others are crying. Death is all that one can smell in the air. Mourners held mass funerals for their loved ones on Friday after overnight Israeli shelling on Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. On the other side, Kibbutz is the site where it all started in southern Israel. Kibbutz, just 3 kilometers away from the Gaza Strip, was the hardest hit site by Hamas militants. All that is left is destroyed and damaged homes. At least 1,000 people were killed in southern Israel, some in their homes, on the streets, and others at the dance festival.
Which they are in now, trying to recover, rebuild the community that was here. Out of 400 people, 1 of every 4 people is either missing or dead. That's a big shot for the community. It was a very close community. It's a one big family.
The visuals from Kibbutz tell you the tale of what war does to a city. Burnt homes, trash gardens, and blood trails covering the floors of homes. The Israeli military says that most of the 200 or so people taken hostage by Hamas to the Gaza Strip are still alive. These hostages have become the proverbial pawns in the war. The horrendous violence that has engulfed Gaza and Israel has already created an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. Israel vows to completely destroy Hamas. Families of hostages are pleading for their release as the war rages on. On both sides, there is no end to suffering of civilians. Let's now go across to our correspondent Jody Cohen, who gets us the latest from on ground.
The mood on the ground in Israel is serious. This Shabbat's the day of rest. Many families across the country are likely to light an extra Sabbath candle and perhaps put an empty seat at their Sabbath table to remember the between 200 and 250 hostages being held in Gaza by Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Now, I've been speaking to people, and there's a feeling of trepidation for many families whose older teenagers are in the army and whose older family members may have been called up, as it's expected that Israel will launch a ground offensive into Gaza to dismantle the Hamas terror group, which is the stated aim of the Israel Defense Forces. There's also an unsettled feeling among many, with an estimated over 300,000 people having been displaced from their homes on the northern and southern borders and moved to central Israel, where they're being housed in hotels and even strangers' homes. But there's also a feeling of togetherness, with an overwhelming outpouring of support for these families, with thousands of tons of supplies having been donated to help them. And from the conversations I've had, there's also a concern for the civilians in Gaza and a recognition that those in Gaza who don't support Hamas are also suffering. But there's a feeling that Hamas needs to be dismantled, as difficult as it would be, in order to free Gaza from Hamas and ensure Israeli people can continue living without fear of infiltration or running to shelter under rocket fire multiple times a day. And there's also a sense of responsibility, with Israel's airline El Al reporting that around 100,000 Israelis have returned from abroad, including active duty soldiers, reservists and medical personnel, in order to play their part in defending the country. This is Jody Cohen for WION World is One.
Now let's take you to the site where it all started. Southern Israel. This is the site from where Hamas militants entered and caught Israel off guard while taking dozens of hostages to Gaza. Here's a report by our correspondent Vishal Pandey from Ground Zero. Take a look.
I grew up in a kibbutz when I came here. The silence is horrific.
Right now I am standing at the Gaza border, and this way goes to the Gaza Strip. As far as I know, the Gaza Strip is around 500 meters away from this location.
Hamas entered here with a lot of intelligence, previous intelligence that they did, because they found a lot of aerial photographs. So the first thing they did is to burn the only ambulance here in the kibbutz, also the only car of the civilian that is in charge of the security here, and also ban all the communication system.
Hamas terrorists entered through this fence in the morning of the 7th of October to the kibbutz Nir Oz. The Hamas terrorists came here in the number of 50 to 100 terrorists, and they infiltrated this kibbutz Nir Oz and they killed around 25 citizens of this kibbutz Nir Oz.
Quien entraron acá es animales, no es personas, es animal. ¿Qué hicieron ahí? Mataron sin problema.
It was a sudden attack on the Israeli territory, and they came here with lots of weapons and the other grenade, and they attacked on this kibbutz Nir Oz.
Terrorists took them out of their house wearing pajamas and barefooted, and took them with a car towards Gaza. Just before they got to the border, they decided to jump out of the car, moving car, and run away for their lives.
It's a picturesque kibbutz, beautiful kibbutz, that got stormed by Hamas. Not only here, all over the communities in the Gaza Strip got stormed by Hamas in an unprecedented attack, ISIL-style attack. They stormed this beautiful, picturesque village and slaughtered children, grandmothers, families.
None of us want to live in a world where elders and babies and children and civilians get kidnapped from their houses. That's not the world I want to raise my kid in.
The Israeli Defense Forces took 8 to 10 hours to reach in this kibbutz Nir Oz after this terror attack in the morning of the 7th of October. This is the visuals from the ground zero. You can see the Hamas terrorists entered in this kibbutz Nir Oz area. They went to the kibbutz Kfar Aza, kibbutz Beri, and the other locations of the Sedrot and Ashkelon, and everywhere they killed lots of innocent citizens of the Israel, and whereabouts of the Israeli hostages is still unknown.
Yarden is a German citizen. We have no proof of life. We're asking for the German government for help and support all the time.
The kidnapped and the hostages, where are they? We don't know, and whereabouts of these hostages are still unknown. With video journalist Surendrantha Jaideep, I am Vishal Pandey, reporting from Gaza border, southern Israel.
It's been nearly 2 weeks since this war began, and we still have no word on the release of hostages. Around 200 people were captured by Hamas from Israel on October the 7th. We've heard the United States make big statements about how it's doing everything it can to secure the release of American hostages captured by Hamas. But America forgot to mention who is spearheading these negotiations. It's the small Gulf nation of Qatar. In the dense caverns of Gaza, Hamas is believed to be holding at least 199 people hostage. Reports say they're being guarded by gunmen and booby traps. Their families continue to appeal for their release. The Israeli army says a majority of the hostages are alive. Remember, people from more than 40 countries are among the hostages. And the hostage crisis is unlike any other. The ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza, its dense lanes, have all turned this hostage crisis into a nightmare for Israel. The need of the hour is not chest-thumping patriotism, but desperate, delicate diplomacy. And Qatar, a tiny nation with extensive ties to militant groups, may be the one to achieve the impossible. What we know so far is this: Qatar is acting as a mediator between Hamas and officials from America. Remember, like the EU and Israel, the US also considers Hamas a terrorist group. So why is Qatar the go-to friend for America to mediate a complex situation? Well, for one, experience. Qatar has mediated the release of people around the world. It acted as a mediator at Ukraine's request. Russia agreed to repatriate 4 Ukrainian children. More recently, reports say Qatar also played a quiet role in freeing 2 American hostages in Africa. Back in 2014, Qatar has worked behind the scenes to win the release of an American journalist held by an Al-Qaeda-affiliated group in Syria. So there's no denying it, Qatar is the power broker in this situation. Its successful diplomacy is well known in the region. But let me remind you, Qatar and Israel have no formal diplomatic ties. Doha did not join the 2020 Abraham Accords. Yet in recent days, reports say that since the war broke out, Qatar has been in frequent contact with Israel at all levels: political, military and intelligence. Here's the thing. This Gulf nation has a reputation of being a geopolitical fixer of sorts. It maintains cordial relations with Iran and Hamas. Reports say that Qatar is also trying to prevent a second front from opening up in this war, involving Hezbollah. How that is panning out, we can't say right now. And in fact, it's no secret. The United States can't do much in the Gulf without Qatar. So in the ongoing hostage crisis, it is Qatar which is leading the talks. But despite Qatar's reputation and track record, Israel's hostage crisis is a challenging one. A military rescue is all but impossible. Look at Gaza. It is one of the most densely populated regions in the world. It has miles of underground tunnels, dwindling water, food and medicine supplies currently. So clearly, diplomacy is the best bet to rescue the hostages. When we talk of the number of hostages, Israel says it is 199. Hamas says it is closer to 250. Reports say this includes elderly people, women, children, one of whom is just 9 months old. Among them are American, French and German citizens. Even as Israel considers the prospect of a ground invasion of Gaza, its hostage crisis is inextricably linked to any kind of military operation. Experts say that Israel will have to contemplate the risks that a ground campaign will pose to the lives of these hostages. Remember, as Israeli airstrikes continue in Gaza, Hamas is already threatening to kill a hostage every time Israel bombs a home in Gaza. The only hope is from the power broker in the region, in this case Qatar. Will this long-time mediator be able to get the hostages back home alive? We certainly hope so. Now, as we've been saying, it all comes down to one question. What does this war mean for you, me, for us? Clearly, it's not the sound of politicians making big speeches, not the sermon of partisans. This war is in the face of the innocent. So we end tonight's Gravitas with a picture of pain. Thanks for watching.